This meeting will please come to order. Will the town clerk please read the call of the meeting and the return of service?
Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Town of Duxbury Special Town Meeting Warrant. Monday, June 16, 2025 at 6 o'clock p.m. Duxbury Schools Performing Arts Center, 73 Alden Street. Plymouth SS, greetings. To the Constable or Town Clerk of the Town of Duxbury in said county. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the Town of Duxbury, qualified to vote in elections and in town affairs, to meet in the Duxbury Performing Arts Center, 73 Alden Street, in said Duxbury on Monday, the 16th day of June, 2025. Next, at 6 p.m. for a special town meeting for the transaction of any business that may legally come before said meeting. And you are hereby directed to serve this warrant by posting attested copies thereof as prescribed by Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10, and by Chapter 2, Section 2.3.1 of the Town of Duxbury General Bylaws, at least 14 days before the time of holding said meeting. Hereof fail not and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of this meeting. Given under your hands this 19th day of May, 2025. Select Board, Brian E. Glennon, II, Chair. Amy M. McNabb, Vice Chair. Fernando Guitar, Clerk. Michael McGee, Cynthia Ladd Fiorini. Plymouth SS, May 21, 2025. Pursuant to the warrant, I have this day notified and warned the inhabitants of the Town of Duxbury, herein described, by posting the warrant in precincts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, to meet at the time and place and for the purposes as described by the bylaws of the town. A true copy attested, Susan C. Kelly, Town Clerk of Duxbury.
Thank you. Unless there is some objection, we'll dispense with the reading of the warrant. I ask that you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to start by thanking all of you for coming out for this meeting so that we can conduct the important business of the town. I'd like to do some introductions, starting with the people that you see facing you in front of the hall. On my right, your left, is the Select Board. Sorry, on my left, your right. Brian Glennon, Chair. Amy McNabb, Vice Chair. Fernando Guitart, Clerk. Michael McGee, and Cynthia Ladd Fiorini. Sitting with them are Rainey Reed, Town Manager, and Mary McKinnon, Finance Director. On the stage to your right are Town Councils Amy Questle and her colleague Greg Corbo. In the front, on your left, are seated the members of the Finance Committee. Betsy Sullivan, Friend Weiler, Nathaniel Taylor, Jackson Kent, Kathleen Glynn, Al Hoban, Sean Dadenston Foley, and Ted Flynn. Charles Weilbrenner is not here. My name is Jim Hartford. I'm the moderator. My first act as a moderator following the election this year. John Tuffy has been sworn in as assistant moderator should the need arise. Special guests with us today are Ken Sweezy and Elizabeth Vader, who are going to present a proclamation recognizing the long service of Diane Bartlett. We will get to that in a moment. We initially planned for exceeding the capacity here in the auditorium. Currently, we don't seem to be up against that. If the capacity does exceed what we have in the pack here, then we will begin to populate the cafeteria. I'd like to review with you certain town meeting procedures. Upon checking in, registered voters were issued a handheld voting device. The voting device entitles you to be seated in a voting section. The voting devices are color-coded and will only work in a location that is the same color as on their device. If you have an issue with your voting device, please go to the teller's desk, which is in the hallway immediately outside the main entrance to this room, and they will issue you a new one. The voting process will be as follows. After debate is over, the moderator will call for a vote. I will announce, please vote, and you will see a green light to my right. Voters will have 20 seconds to, initially, for the larger crowds, we're going to extend that period to approximately 40 seconds within which to vote. When the 40 seconds have passed, the moderator will announce that voting is closed and the light will be turned off. To use the handheld device, press 1 for yes or 2 for no. If you wish to change your vote, you just need to press the correct button. The screen on the handheld device will indicate that you have voted, and the green light will indicate that your vote has been registered. As part of the checking in procedure, the tellers have been authorized and instructed by the Board of Registers to request positive identification in cases of doubt. Assisted listening devices are available at the check-in desks. They're provided by the Municipal Commission on Disability. The fire chief has requested that I point out the fire exits from this room. There are 2 fire exits on the lower level of the auditorium, one to my immediate right, over there, and one on my left when you entered the room. There are also 2 fire exits on the upper level of the room at the rear of the hall behind the balconies. Please do not block these exits by standing or placing anything such as chairs in front of them. The fire chief has also requested that you not sit in the aisles or on the stairs between the balcony and the main floor. I request that all cell phones be turned off while the meeting is in session, except for public safety officials. For your information, this meeting is being taped. At this point in our town meetings, we customarily vote to give permission to non-voters who are town employees, officials, and invited guests who are not registered voters in the town of Duxbury to speak to town meeting. Accordingly, I will entertain a motion to allow our town employees, officials, and invited guests to speak should the occasion arise.
Second.
Sorry? Yes. So let's open the period for voting and vote via your handheld devices. What's that? You wanted it to go for 40 seconds for the first 2 articles, and now I'm going to shorten it up. Motion passes 234 to 34. This meeting is governed by the statutes, our town bylaws, and town meeting time. In addition, I suggest that we abide by the following procedures so that we may conduct the business of the meeting in an orderly fashion. After I have announced that we are considering an article, the article will be moved by the Finance Committee and their recommendation will be heard. I will then give the proposer of the article the opportunity of making their opening remarks. I request that all presenters limit their remarks to a maximum of 5 minutes. Upon completion of these presentations, the matter will be open for general debate. If you wish to speak, I request that you go to one of the microphones. The microphones for your use are located at the back of the auditorium and at the foot of each of the balcony aisles. These are the only microphones, and if you are seated in the cafeteria, you will need to come to the auditorium in order to ask a question. After you have been recognized by me, would you please identify yourself by name and street address? I also request that all speakers limit their remarks to a maximum of 5 minutes, and ask that speakers do not attempt to be recognized for a second time on a discussion of any article unless every other person who wishes to speak has had an opportunity to do so for the first time. Any lengthy or complicated motions or amendments should be submitted in writing so that we will know precisely what is being voted upon and so that we can maintain an accurate record of the proceeding. Town Council is available to assist if you have any questions about the drafting of any such motions. One of our favorites, procedures, re a motion for the previous question. 1, move the question is a motion to end debate. It takes a 2/3 vote. It's a useful motion at town meetings, but there is some concern that it not be abused or used unfairly. To that end, we now have 2 special procedures rules that we follow. I will not accept move the question from someone who has just finished speaking on an article. This eliminates move the previous question as a vehicle to get the last word. The second procedure is intended to assure that both the proponents and opponents of an article will have had an opportunity to speak before debate is ended by a motion for previous question. So until the article is open for general debate, I will not accept a move the question. Reconsideration. As in the past, a motion to reconsider, A, requires the same quantitative vote as the original motion, must be made at the same session as the original motion or the next succeeding session. C, may be made only once. D, a motion to reconsider may only be considered if the proponent provides, in the opinion of the moderator, factual information that was not available during the session when the original vote was taken. Finally, if we are unable to finish the special town meeting tonight, I will ask for a motion to recess. When would we move it? Until tomorrow at 6 p.m. Now for the business of the special town meeting. Mrs. Sullivan, actually before we move forward with the motion, I'm going to recognize Representative Swayze and Elizabeth Vader from Senator O'Brien's office.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for recognizing us. Thank you for coming out. We are just going to start off really briefly by honoring one of our own this evening. As many people, especially the ones up here, know, the work of the town can often be very thankless, so I always appreciate the opportunity to make it not so. So we are here just to honor Diane Bartlett for over 20 years of service to the town of Duxbury. And I know that Diane was not able to make it out tonight, but some of her family may have, or if she's at home watching, I just want to be the first, hopefully in a long line of many, to say thank you. The town would not be what it is if not for dedicated volunteers like yourself. So on behalf of myself, Elizabeth here with Senator O'Connor's office, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we thank you, and we are happy to present a couple citations to commemorate all of your years of service. So thank you to Diane and the Bartlett family.
Diane was unable to be here tonight, but I understand her husband Richard and daughter Stacy are here, and if you'd like to come forward to receive these proclamations.
Thank you. Okay, perfect, thank you.
We have an additional citation from the town.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Glennon, Chair of the Select Board. I'd like to read this resolve in honor to recognize Diane W. Bartlett. Whereas Diane W. Bartlett first began decades of volunteer service well over 40 years ago, starting in 1982 when she was a member of the school's calendar committee, and then numerous other school committees regarding the development of policy and curriculum, all for the betterment of the Duxbury Public Schools. And whereas Diane W. Bartlett continued her dedicated service by being appointed to numerous committees such as the Duxbury Housing Authority, the Highway Safety Committee, and the Community Preservation Committee, just to name a few. And whereas Diane W. Bartlett's distinguished tenure has too many accomplishments to list, but one of the most deserving to mention was her perseverance as the first trustee and then chair for multiple years of the Affordable Housing Trust, where she was a tireless advocate and a foundational leader instrumental in bringing affordable housing to Duxbury. And whereas Diane W. Bartlett, because of her extensive years of volunteer service, was awarded the Duxbury Community Volunteer Award in 2018, which was more than well-deserved and a testament to her everlasting legacy. Be it resolved that on the 16th day of June 2025, the town of Duxbury, through its select board and the town manager, offers Diane W. Bartlett its most grateful thanks for her lengthy dedication to the town and wishes her a long and happy retirement.
Watch your step on the cord there. Now for the business of the special town meeting. Mrs. Sullivan, may we have the motion under Article 1?
Article 1, amend zoning bylaws, add a new section 440 entitled MBTA Communities Overlay District, and amend the zoning map, overlay map, to add MBTA Communities Overlay District map. I move Article 1 as printed in the warrant, except that the map shown on pages 21, 22, 23, and 24 will be replaced by the maps contained in the handout titled Duxbury 3A MCOD Overlay District Amendments.
Second.
Finance Committee voted 8-0-0 to recommend. Select Board voted 4-1-0 to recommend.
I think we have one point of order that
Hello. Hi, Sue Schofield, James Road. Mr. Moderator, we spoke briefly about this before the meeting. Typically, town meeting starts at 7 p.m. And because this is such an important issue, the MBTA Article Number 1, I would move that we would have Article 1 after Article 3. So if we would just change the order, so if Article 1 now became Article 3. I don't know how to make that happen, but that's what I'm presenting to you.
is,
I don't know.
And my reason being is that 7 o'clock is the typical start time for town meeting. There are a lot of people, obviously many people know it and they're here, but I would like to see as many people as possible be able to weigh in and vote on this important issue.
I believe that, unfortunately, since we have moved and have opened Article 1, that we cannot change the order at this time.
What a shame, because I came to you before the meeting. Thank you.
Kristen Rapp from the Planning Board.
Thank you. Hi, Kristen Rapp, Planning Board Chair. On May 12, 2025, the Planning Board held a public meeting and voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend favorably in support of approval of Article 1 as written in the special town meeting warrant. On June 9, 2025, the Planning Board voted unanimously via roll call Ms. Turcott, aye. Mr. Ray, aye. Mr. Carpenter, aye. And Mr. Gant, aye, to recommend the amended maps and article text as shown in the warrant, and that the locations are considered eligible locations. Great, thank you. Okay, how's everybody doing tonight? Okay, this is my first time speaking in front of town meeting, so bear with me. And I'm also a little hoarse, so I'm very grateful I have a microphone tonight. As I mentioned, I'm Kristen Rapp, the chair of the planning board. I'd like to thank you all for coming out on a Monday night, for hustling to get here after work, for rearranging your dinner plans, and for caring so much about our community to make this a priority. Please look around this room at all the people who are gathered here. Please look to the people on your left, your right, the people in the front, and the people in back of you. Please remember that we are all part of this Duxbury community, and that tonight we will ask you to support 3 new zoning bylaws that we believe are in the best interests of this community. On behalf of the planning board, I thank you all for joining us tonight. Before we dive into Article 1, MBTA Communities District Bylaw, I'd like to provide some context to make sure that everyone has the same information tonight. Then we'll hear from the MBTA Communities Working Group, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions or comments. There are 5 topics that I'd like to touch on with you tonight. The first is zoning, and what it is exactly. The planning board is an elected board and is responsible for the set of rules and regulations that govern how real property or real estate can be used and can and cannot be used in our town. We're also responsible for drafting, for conducting public hearings, and for submitting zoning amendments and recommendations here at town meeting. Zoning helps to provide a clear roadmap for what we want our town to be and controls what we can and cannot do in particular areas of town or even on a particular lot. We have zoning districts, such as those that are fully residential, such as my neighborhood off of Congress Street, or also combined commercial and residential districts, such as Millbrook. We also have zoning overlays that add an extra layer of rules on top of those districts. One thing that I'd really like you to walk away with tonight, and that is that zoning does not mean that something will be built. It just means that zoning says that it can be built. We also have the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is an appointed board, and hears appeals from the rulings of the building inspector and provides special permits and general permits as authorized by our bylaws. Tonight we'll talk about 3 changes that we'd like to make to our bylaws. The first bylaw that we'll discuss pertains to the MBTA Communities Overlay District Bylaw. As most of you know, the Commonwealth is requiring communities adjacent to MBTA transit hubs, such as the one in Kingston, to provide zoning for multifamily housing to support the state goals of providing more housing near these hubs. The MBTA Communities Working Group will discuss this in detail shortly. And then the second and third bylaws address accessory dwelling units. And again, we'll get into these a little later. The second topic that I'd like to talk about is minimal impact zoning. We held a special town meeting last fall in which we as a community voted against zoning, which would have likely resulted in a large multifamily project near Bonji's on Route 3. As your elected leaders, the planning board was responsible for the zoning, and we heard you loud and clear. Our top takeaway was that our community wanted very little impact from this state requirement, so we asked our MBTA Communities Working Group to make this a priority. We refer to this as minimal impact zoning. The third topic is our 4-legged table approach. Thank you. Yes, so we decided we wanted to take more of a 4-legged table approach this time. We wanted to ensure that we had the input and the support of the planning board, the select board, the working group, and our community in order to figure out a way to create compliant zoning that would have minimal impact to our town. To do this, the working group held public forums and weekly meetings for the last 3 months, building on input from our community and providing updates to the planning board and the select board along the way. At the first 2 forums, the working group provided ballots to the audience and asked them to vote on a variety of sites. The top 2 votes from the community meetings are what we will vote on tonight. Please keep this in mind as we proceed, that it was our community, the people to your left, to your right, in front and behind of you, who actually chose those 2 sites. Based on this information, the working group crafted a bylaw to come up with, we believe, is the best possible scenario for our town. And then the 4th topic, if you wouldn't mind going back, thank you. Our 4th topic is professional assistance. One of our second biggest takeaway from last fall was that we needed professional assistance with our outreach so that we could better engage our community early and often. To do that, we leaned on CHAPA, which is the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, a nonprofit that was able to provide us with the tools and guidance that we needed to navigate the complex MBTA communities law. The working group worked with CHAPA on a presentation that CHAPA provided, and then the team actually personalized it for Duxbury's needs. We'll see this presentation shortly. The town also hired MAPC, or Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the same group who previously assisted us with our comprehensive plan, to help with the complex modeling of the site so that Duxbury would be compliant. And my 5th and last point here tonight is EOHLC feedback. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, or EOHLC, is the state department that will determine whether our bylaw meets the guidelines for compliance. Over the past 6 weeks, we've had several letters from and discussions with them about our draft bylaw. We've worked through 8 different issues and are down to 4 outstanding ones. 3 are mere housekeeping items, while the 4th is a boundary change on our maps. And that is what's already been referenced within the warrant that you heard earlier today. So momentarily, we'll hear from the MBTA Communities Working Group, who'll provide more information. This team spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours collectively working through the minutiae of state guidelines, hosting community forums, working with the consultants, presenting to the community, and so much more. We're all very indebted to this group for their efforts, their dedication, their service to Duxbury. So now I'd like to welcome up Steve Gant and Tag Carpenter of the working group to lead us through that presentation now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Steve Gant. I'm the chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group here in town. I'm a member of the Planning Board. And so, as Kristen mentioned, we're going to be presenting to you just a brief, high-level overview of the proposal that you're going to be voting on here tonight. At this moment, I'm actually going to be handing this off to Tag Carpenter, the vice chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group, who has been working with us on this. Tag will go through the first half of the presentation, and then I will close out with the second half, and then after that, we'll take questions and answers. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. This is how we're going to get 10 minutes, 5 minutes per speaker. So I'll try to be brief. I'm hopeful that many of you are very familiar with this. We've been doing a roadshow, if you will, for about a month or two. The agenda of our discussion here is 3 main points: understanding the law. We'll talk a little bit about our response to the law, and then next steps, which is a little dated. This is really the next step. So we'll talk about what the act is, how it affects us, the working group. We'll talk about the legal situation, and we'll actually present, the formal proposal that you see there in the warrant. So the MBTA Communities Act, as we all know, was passed in 2021, requires 177 communities to update their zoning, and it is intended to increase the housing supply. The public policy objective is to add 220,000 housing units to the state by 2030, which is much greater than the level of production we've experienced to date. The way that the legislature chose to do this is they delegated to the bureaucracy to mandate that the communities identify the locations where the zoning can be placed. So while it is a mandate from on high, we are given control to decide where to place these increased density zones. And we want to make sure that everybody's clear on the point that passing this zoning does not require the construction of anything. And in fact, as we go through the details, you'll see that the strategy was to actually minimize that impact, as was noted. The working group itself, 7 members,
we started early this year, appointed by the Select Board, and we've met every Thursday night since February. And really appreciate those folks who've come out to participate in those conversations with us, and I think that we've got a much better product as a result of that engagement. So let's cover the questions of how the Act impacts Duxbury. The specific requirement is that we must own at least 50 acres where property owners have expanded rights. This is granting additional rights to the property owners in these areas. This town meeting has a deadline of mid-July of this year to act on this. After July 15th, any towns that have not passed zoning will be out of compliance. So this is what we're doing here today. Again, by passing the plan, we're not required to build any housing. It just conveys that right to property owners if they should choose to build multifamily housing. So in terms of the fact that we did this last year, many of you were probably here in November, we soundly rejected what I call a 60-40 proposal. 60% of the land under that proposal was already developed, 40% was available for development, and that prospect of a large multifamily complex being added was opposed strongly by the town. And we take that to heart. The working group consulted with the planning board, with the Select Board, and the strategy was taken to basically avoid compliance if possible, or avoid significant impacts at a minimum. And that's what you'll be seeing as we continue through this presentation. I want to take a moment here and pause before handing it off to Steve to just mention that I'm sure you're aware there are legal proceedings that have been involved in this. The town of Milton filed a lawsuit, and it was rejected in January 2025. This added some doubt and ambiguity to the last vote as far as whether it was necessary for the town to actually pass this zoning. That ruling was very specific, that it wasn't possible for a town to choose not to comply. And then this year, our town, our Select Board, voted to appeal to the Supreme Court in Plymouth based on the auditor's finding that this was an unfunded mandate. That is a procedural issue with the way the law was passed. The auditor's decision or finding is not legally binding. And so, along with 8 other towns, a court case was heard recently, and the Supreme Court denied our request for an injunction, which would have prevented our need to comply, and also dismissed the lawsuit, which is a pretty strong rejection of the argument. There were other arguments made in that case by other towns. All of those other arguments were rejected. So at this point in time, in terms of legalities, we do not see any benefit to pursuing that. And the Select Board has made a decision, it was announced last Monday, that the town would not pursue any further litigation. So with that, that's kind of the bad news portion. I'd like to bring Steve Gant back to talk about the benefits that you might consider in a positive vote on the zoning today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ted. As we look at this, there are benefits that come with complying with the MBTA communities law. So what are some of when we talk about the benefits, what are they? Well, one of the key benefits here is we'd retain our eligibility for at least 17 state grant funding programs. These are grant programs that the town has taken advantage of in the past and that we will continue to take advantage of in the future. These are grants that protect our areas from storms and from flooding, also deal with upgrading our infrastructure, including our sidewalk project. In 2023, 2024, during that 2-year period, we received over $2 million that we would be ineligible for if we were non-compliant under this particular law. We've currently applied for about between $1 and $2 million in new grants. That number changes all the time as we apply for new grants, but it's between $1 and $2 million, again, for which we would be ineligible if we were non-compliant under this particular law. We would also, as one of the benefits as well, is that we would maintain controlling over our zoning. we would avoid some additional costs to achieve compliance. Obviously, here we are at town meeting. This comes at a cost to us, the taxpayers, consultants, legal fees that we've incurred, et cetera. If we're non-compliant, those costs will continue. And if we do not choose our own zoning locations, the state could take some action against us to compel compliance. So feedback from the state pre-adoption review, there was mention of this earlier, Kristen mentioned it. What we did was we had our plan that we submitted to the state for what's referred to as pre-adoption review. So what's pre-adoption review? That means that we just submitted our plan. The state did a preliminary review of the bylaw and the maps that we had to give us an indication if there were any issues that would come up as part of the full review when we would submit the plan, submit the bylaw and the maps to the state for their full review, again, providing it would pass at special town meeting here tonight. So we did that, and the state provided us with some feedback. On that feedback, again, as Kristen mentioned, they had 8 items that they identified through further discussion with EOHLC. That was reduced to 4 advisory issues, 3 of which were administrative in nature, and the 4th of which has already been incorporated in the article that you're going to be voting on here this evening. That one action item was a modification of the zoning district boundaries. And what that requirement is that we needed to include the right-of-way areas on Kingstown Way and Tremont Street. I'll be showing those to you in just a moment on the revised map. Again, this feedback was delivered to us after the warrant had closed, and so as a result, the amendment is incorporated into the article that we'll be working on, and that's why we had to amend it. So here's kind of a large overview of the proposed map. And so you can see on the left, in the upper left area there, you see the MCOD Kingstown, and then in the lower right, you see the MCOD Tremont. And these, we had chosen these areas because these are the 2 densest areas in town that we were able to choose, and that based on the requirements of this particular law, these are the areas that we were actually able to choose and that would be compliant. This plan results in no additional capacity at the Village of Duxbury, the MCOD Kingstown location, and at the Island Creek residences. We expect that the proposal would not result in any new housing in the near term. So here's a satellite overview of the maps. One thing that you'll see the area for MCOD Kingstown on the left. There's an area that was carved out, and you can see that it's that kind of key-shaped area that was carved out of the original map. And then what was added on, you can see there's a small strip of land there going into Tremont Street. That's what the state was requiring us to add to this particular district. And so we had to modify the maps to reflect that. So that's the MCOD Kingstown Multifamily Communities Overlay District. That's what MCOD stands for. That's the MCOD Kingstown sub-district. And then on the right, you can see the MCOD Tremont. So that is that's the Island Creek development, as well as a portion of the First Baptist Church. And so there, the only modification that was made for amendment purposes was the land that you see going out to Tremont Street was added on to these districts. So why do we propose zoning where multifamily housing already exists? So again, this is an approach that's been approved or that's been adopted by other towns. Braintree and Hingham took similar approaches here. They put their overlays on existing dense areas, and the state has actually reviewed that, and particularly in the case of Braintree, they had approved it. This also expands the expanded development rights. It'll create very little opportunity to add new units. And adding new units to these properties that had the existing apartment buildings, again, this is part of our strategy. It's logistically difficult, and it would be quite costly as well. The Village of Duxbury, that MCOD Kingstown district, that's already at the proposed density. And the HOA or the cooperative board there at the Village of Duxbury, they would need to pass a majority vote to evict residents to make changes to the property. And then the Island Creek district, the wastewater treatment facility that's there, is already at or near capacity. Again, that would add cost if there was going to be new development there. So our strategy for compliance, again, creating a zoning plan that complies with the Act in case our lawsuit fails, and of course it did. We are looking to zone properties where the development of new housing, again, would be extremely difficult or unlikely. We want to maintain our eligibility for state money to avoid enforcement action without, with minimizing the possibility of creating new housing. If in the future, if the law were to become invalid, if we were to pass it tonight, but if the law were to become invalid for any reason, we could respond by repealing the bylaw at a future town meeting, and that would remove the MBTA Communities Overlay District. And with that, we can go to questions and answers. Thank you very much.
At this time, I'd like to open the warrant article up for discussion from the floor. I see it. Ms. Sprayer?
Hello. Oh. So what you're saying is you're open for questions, yes? Colleen Breyer, Toby Garden Street. So how at the MCOD Tremont, how many more units could they add? You said they're almost to capacity, and we're hoping they won't develop, but...
Yeah, based on the last run of the model, at MCOD Tremont, there are currently 320 units there now. At Tremont, 320 units there now, and this zoning would allow for an additional 560 units.
Okay.
So that would be the potential. So that would be what it would permit. But again, we've got the 320 units that are there currently. So if you're looking at what the net new units that would be permitted, that would be 240.
So you're saying 560 total?
560 total, but again, there's 320 existing there, so you have to adjust for that.
I just assume, okay.
Yep.
So not 560 additional, okay. And I know you said that the wastewater treatment plant is at almost capacity, but they could increase their capacity, correct, to accommodate those 560 units?
There's the potential for them to do that. I don't presume to know what the requirements would be for that.
Yeah.
But certainly that would involve cost and time.
Yeah, they just have to figure the cost benefit for themselves. And how would these additional 240 units affect our town services? What would those projected cost increases be?
Yep. So we did not perform a fiscal impact analysis as a result of that. So we don't know exactly what the impact would be with regard to the impact on fire, the impact on police. One of the things to consider here, though, is that when you look at, for example, the impact on the schools. When you look at the types of units that would be developed under this type of development, if there were to be any development, those types of units attract residents who typically don't have, it's not to say that they don't, but typically speaking, they don't have a lot of students or a lot of student-aged children in these units, so that we wouldn't expect that there would be a dramatic impact to the schools. For example, if we look at the last time that Island Creek was expanded, it was permitted back in 2015. They had units that were added. They came online, I think, in 2017, 2018, roughly around that time. When you look at the enrollment in the school system, you can see that enrollment at the schools continued to decline even after those new units came on.
But we don't know how many students may have entered the system from there, do we?
Again, we're looking at the overall picture here. That's
Okay. Assuming, can the schools tell us what is the cost per student right now? We can make some sort of assumption how many students might.
Yeah, I don't have
The
numbers on
schools? What are we paying per student right now?
I don't have that number.
The schools are here, no?
If someone from the schools are
No one?
able to
No one
speak
from the
to that?
schools? Or the finance department?
Nope. Yes. Oh, okay. It's about $18,000.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a non-voter. I'm a previous student at Duxbury High School. I live at 171 Buckboard Road. My name is Helena Penn, and I have a little brother with a learning disability who had a really sweet math teacher this year. She's brand new. She really went out of her way to make sure he was accommodated, and I had, two teachers that really showed extra effort, and I recently discovered that they're being moved to the middle school, and my little brother's math teacher is being fired. And I'm just wondering, with this new increase of residents, which we know they will probably have children, how's that going to affect the school budget? And are we going to have more cuts to our budget?
That's a very good question. As I mentioned earlier, we did not do a fiscal impact study, so we don't really know. We don't have projections as to what would happen with respect to enrollment or with respect to additional costs that would result.
Okay. No answer. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Right here. Sheila Lynch Bentonen, 344 West Street. I have a question. If conceivably we pass this tonight and the Beacon Communities Limited, which owns Island Creek, next week applies for additional 200 to 500 units, and then some town appeals up to the Supreme Court of Massachusetts from the Plymouth Court, and it in fact becomes recognized as an unfunded mandate, and we have an opportunity to then rescind our vote tonight. But between tonight, if we vote yes, and a potential rescission in the future, would the Beacon Communities have a right to do additional units between now and another lawsuit?
So just so that I understand, so what you're saying is if we were to pass this tonight in its current form, and then at some future date, there was that the bylaw was, we had an opportunity to rescind the bylaw if it was invalidated or repealed, would there be an ability for them to act on the permit, presuming they put a permit in? Would they have the ability to act on that permit during that interstitial period between passing tonight and when it would be revoked? Is that the nature of your question?
Kind of, yes.
Okay. Quite honestly, I don't know. I would actually defer to others to answer that question.
Mr. Dennison, can you?
No, I'm going to ask town council to step over here and just address this for a minute.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Speaker. The question here is whether, once the bylaw takes effect, if the courts decide that 3A is no longer a valid law and the town were to rescind the zoning, would any housing or applications made during that interim period of time that the bylaw is in effect still be able to remain there? And the answer to that question would be yes, that if someone comes in and receives permitting under a bylaw that is in effect at the time, and they would then be considered a pre-existing lawful conforming use, and so they would be protected from any subsequent changes to the bylaw at that point.
So, to clarify, if the Beacon Communities got approval in the next few months and then it was rescinded, the town could not rescind their approval?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, that is correct. Once they have an approval, then they become a pre-existing lawful use and they're entitled to grandfathering at that point.
Thank you.
and
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. I was asked to give a clarification. The primary issue in the lawsuits is whether or not the Section 3A and the regulations constitutes an unfunded mandate. If the appeals succeed and the courts ultimately find that Section 3A is an unfunded mandate, the remedy for that is not to rescind Section 3A. The remedy for that would be for the legislature to provide the funding to cover the local mandate. And so that would be a further impediment to any housing that had already been built pursuant to this bylaw if it's approved, in that Section 3A, even if it is found to be an unfunded mandate, may not in and of itself be found to be invalid and rescinded.
thank you. Yes, up here.
Hill, Christine Hill. I was hoping Mr. Corbo could explain all the other issues in the lawsuit, including our own lawsuit and the lawsuit that Marshfield filed, and all the other towns as well, because it's not just about the unfunded mandate.
I'm not entirely clear on what it was that you were asking Mr. Corbo to expound on.
I'm sorry, I'll go back up. There's multiple complaints. There's multiple complaints in our lawsuit, and they have been consolidated with other lawsuits, and some of those lawsuits contain complaints that aren't in our lawsuit. And so the unfunded mandate is one part of it, but there's a huge number of other complaints that are in these lawsuits that Mr. McGee just wanted to apparently to limit it to the unfunded mandates. But there's all these other complaints about the reasonableness of the law, about whether or not the, about whether or not the law was placed in the right section of the right, I'm not a lawyer, the right section of Chapter 40A. And so I was hoping that Mr. Corbo could enumerate all of these other complaints the towns have made, because I think it's misleading to say that the only issue is the unfunded mandate.
Thank you. Ms. Crowley.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, there are other claims. There are lawsuits by other towns. But as far as Duxbury is concerned, the claims were that Section 3A itself is an unfunded mandate, and that the regulations, as applied, were not reasonable with respect to Duxbury. Those claims were both rejected, as were the claims brought by every single other town that filed a lawsuit alleging similar things, and none of those claims, in my opinion, would have resulted in rescinding Section 3A. While it may have had some effect on the regulations, again, Section 3A likely would have continued to stand, as the Supreme Judicial Court has already found that the law itself was constitutional and enforceable by the Attorney General.
Yes, over here.
Again, Bay Ridge Lane. I believe at the last meeting, this whole scenario was voted down just about 10-1, 793 to 81. And I also assume that most of the people here have already made up their mind which way they want to vote. So if we could get a vote and get on with this without further ado, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
I will take some more questions. Yes, up here in the blue shirt.
One question, actually, before we get to that vote. I, like the gentleman before, am frustrated that we are here again because we have already voted this down. Andrew Tenney, 32 Harrison Street, nearly a lifetime resident. Frustrated by the fact that we have a Monday town meeting, especially on such a hot topic that we have before us tonight. So, given the fact that we have already voted this down one time before, and now here it is yet again before us, should this pass tonight, those that are opposed to this, what are our next steps? Do we have an opportunity to once again file a petition and have another vote brought before the town?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. So under Chapter 39 of the general laws, any group of 200 citizens can bring a petition to call a special town meeting. If there's already a special town meeting called, a group of 100 citizens can put an article on the warrant, and if it's an annual town meeting, a group of 10 citizens can put an article on the warrant.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Moderator, if I may? And I did want to provide some additional perspective there. So the question is, we did vote on this last November, and now we're voting on it again here this evening. A few things that we need to keep in mind. Last November, the landscape of this whole issue was very different than it is today. That was before the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, had ruled on the Milton case. When the Supreme Judicial Court ruled in January, they ruled that the law is constitutional and that the law is enforceable. In November, we didn't know that that was the case. The SJC had not yet ruled at that time. The SJC has now ruled. We know that this law is constitutional. We now know that the law is enforceable. That's a very different perspective that we have today than we had back then. That's the first thing. And then, as Mr. Corbo indicated, the challenge that Duxbury and other towns had raised with regard to the law, those have since been invalidated and they've been thrown out, and so the town is not appealing. So our legal options are pretty much at an end at this stage. So what we're left with is the law again that's enforceable. We're obligated to comply with it, and that's why we're here again this evening.
Yes.
Lester Lloyd, 21 Washington Street. I just want to emphasize that the reason these two sites, Tremont Street and the other one, were chosen is because it is very unlikely that any new units would be built. That is, although technically 240 odd units could be built on the Tremont Street site. In fact, not only because of the sewage treatment plant issue, but in addition, I don't think the way the site is currently laid out, correct me if I'm wrong, 240 units can't be built without making, for instance, tearing buildings down or building on top of buildings that weren't structured to be built on top of, and so on and so forth. So that's the reason this site was chosen, totally different from the Bonji site. Thank you.
Thank you. It's up here.
Hi, Julie Bonatti, 2 Peachtree Lane. It was not that long ago that many of us were here in this auditorium and did not pass the override in the ballot box when we got to that point. People were not willing to pay the taxes that were needed to fund the necessities of our town. So what my question is about how much money will we be losing that the taxpayers will then need to pay, because we will be losing grant funding if we do not pass this.
Yep, so again, a very good question. As I had mentioned earlier, it was roughly $2 million if we look back to 2023, 2024, about $2 million in grant money that would have been exposed to non-compliance. In other words, the state could have withheld those funds from us if we were non-compliant. With regard to what things look like going in the future, it's impossible to say, but suffice it to say, we regularly rely on grants from the state. We would be exposed, and clearly, we would have difficulty making up any funds that we would lose through those grants.
So, for example, the seawall grant, right, the sidewalk grant, what were some of the other ones that we could potentially lose, or things that moving forward we would want that we could apply for that we would no longer be eligible for?
Right. So again, really all we can do is look to the past, for what we've received. So, for example, in 2023, there's a Seaport Economic Council grant that was given by the Economic Development Department. That was for about $200,000. There was a Community Planning Early Action Grant from EOHLC. There was about $50,000. There was the Coastal Resiliency Fund. This had to do with the with the seawall. There was a $2 million grant there that would have been exposed. There was an EEA land planning grant from EOEEA. That's Energy and Environmental Affairs, about $41,000. This gives you an idea of some of the programs. Altogether, there are 17 grant programs. I don't have the list of all 17 here with me, but right now, the way that the regulations are written, 17 grant programs are exposed to noncompliance. In other words, we would potentially be ineligible to receive grants from those programs if we were noncompliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more, and then I think we're probably ready to move forward.
Hi, my name is Selden Terse. I live at King Caesar Road, and the first thing I want to say is thank you to the various committees and the people sitting in front of us today for the hours and hours of work that you have put into this. I think that has been missed. And I'm sure this will not be a popular opinion. I have lived here my entire life, so I'm willing to risk saying it. I was here at the last meeting, and I sat here incredulous at the cavalier attitude of people saying, we don't need that grant, we don't need that grant, screw that grant. One person even said that word. And I think with the state of our finances right now, the fact that we're here trying to save policemen and firemen's jobs, that our finances are not that sound, and we need the grants we have gotten already and the future grants, and I think people need to tread carefully, blowing off the thousands of hours of work that it has taken you all to get to this point. And I have faith in the select board and faith in other leaders in the town. Sorry, everyone that is here to vote it down, that you have gone through the difficult work of getting us to this place. And nobody likes to feel like they're backed into a corner. I get that. But I think we're in a little bit of a corner. And I just want to say again, thank you to all of you for all the work you've done to get us to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. I'm Brian Glennon, Chair of your Select Board, and also I'm a member of the MBTA Communities Working Group. I'm voting in favor of Article 1 because I believe it is in the town's best interest, and here are my 5 reasons why. First, we may disagree about how the Commonwealth has handled this process, but the town is required by state law to comply. Not only has the state's Supreme Court said so, but when Duxbury challenged its applicability to the town, the Plymouth Superior Court threw our case out. Moreover, the governor and the legislature know that the law is controversial and have had ample opportunities to change the law, but they've refused to do so. I understand this has been frustrating, and I am with you. But just because we may not like the law does not grant us permission to disregard it. I'm sure each of us can come up with a list of other state laws we'd like to ignore. I know I can. But we have to follow them anyway. Second, this issue before us tonight isn't a referendum on what we think about the state law. The issue tonight is whether the bylaw and maps proposed by the working group are the town's best shot at legal compliance while minimizing potential impacts as much as possible. The proposal tonight is a result of months of work, including many public meetings, information and feedback sessions, and public hearing. In fact, tonight's proposal is a result of the input and direction that you provided to the working group. You told the working group what sites to focus on, as well as what zoning controls are most important to you. I believe that the proposal before you is well designed to achieve the intended goal of legal compliance while minimizing the potential impacts as much as possible. Importantly, a no vote tonight does not excuse the town from compliance with the law. All a no vote will do is send the working group back to the drawing board to come up with yet another proposal to be considered at a future town meeting. Bear in mind that tonight's proposal is strictly for administrative zoning purposes, and no one is required to actually build anything if they don't want to. Third, by voting yes, the town preserves its eligibility for a number of important state grants. As you know, the town, like many other communities, is in a very difficult financial situation. While most of the town's revenues are derived from you as the taxpayers, we also rely on state grants to fund projects. If our access to grants is shut off a month from now, the town will then need to make even more difficult financial decisions. Fourth, while it may be questionable how many, if any, new units can be built at Island Creek, there is a benefit to our community in the event of construction. We've heard over and over that Duxbury residents, particularly our seniors and young adults, need housing options. Any new units built will help address that need, as at least 10% will be affordable, and of those, Duxbury locals receive first priority. And finally, I recognize that in government as in life, there are no solutions, but only trade-offs. In weighing the pros against the cons, I believe that tonight's proposal is well positioned to allow the town to comply with the law while minimizing potential impacts. Because I believe tonight's proposal is in the town's best interests, I'm voting yes on Article 1 and respectfully request that you join me. Thank you.
I think we've had a good sampling of opinions and commentary. I'm going to ask you to deeply consider whether you're introducing something new as you're standing at the microphone, or if we should be at a point where we can move forward with this vote. Yes.
Can you please tell us what, if Beacon wants to tear down every building that they own in this town, what is stopping them from adding 3, 4, 5-story buildings and building the dense number of units that this law is putting upon our town? That's question number one.
I think that's essentially a speculation that we don't have any insight into.
But have you looked into that? Have you questioned that? Have any other towns come up with that question? Because if the lady that asked about Beacon earlier, if what the town attorney has confirmed that if they come in tomorrow and we vote yes today and they come in tomorrow and say, give us a permit,
Mr.
what is stopping them from?
Have you had any conversation with the management company on that?
First, ma'am, could you give us your name and your address?
Gisela Cahill, 2 Jeremiah Drive.
Great, thank you. Your question is what's stopping Beacon from proceeding with anything?
Correct.
Right. In the end, this is something that would potentially permit additional construction, but of course there are limits to what can be done. The fact that we're at the Island Creek location, that location has already been thoroughly built out. If they were to add units there, they would have to do significant redevelopment of the existing buildings. They would either have to tear buildings down.
What is stopping them from saying, we will invest, we will do significant
I'm sorry,
reinvestment?
Questions should be directed through the moderator, please.
I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So through you,
I'll
Mr.
direct the
Moderator.
question to you.
Yeah, okay. So through you, Mr. Moderator. Again, this is a zoning proposal. The zoning proposal is something that would allow new building in the areas that we're putting these overlays on. So that's what this is. And now you said, what's to stop them from putting 5-story buildings on there?
Whatever they need to comply, Mr. Moderator, with the 15 densely unit per acre. How do we, the town, say there's only room for 240 units?
Right. So again, through you, Mr. Moderator. So what you're referring to is the overall density that we're permitting with regard to these two specific subdistricts, the MCOD Tremont and the MCOD Kingstown. So that's again, the overall density there is 15 units per acre. Again, they cannot build a 5-story building at either of these locations. The bylaw prohibits that. It caps it
Can
out.
they knock these down?
Thank you very much for your comments, but I think we'll move along to some of the other.
I'm not finished.
Thank you.
I am not finished.
Gentleman over here.
Excuse me?
Mr. Moderator, I think we've discussed this article adequately. I move the question.
Thank you. We have a motion seconded to move the question, which requires a majority vote. I'd like to open the voting. Yes means we will move forward to vote with no further discussion. No means that the discussion opportunities will remain open. 1 is yes, 2 is no. One if you want to move the question, 2 if you want to continue to discuss. 1 means to end debate. Voting 1 means to end the debate. Not to end debate. The motion to end debate carries. $255 to 123, 1 abstention. So now we're going to vote the article as moved initially by Mrs. Sullivan and seconded with the handout attachment as the new zoning overlay maps. I'd like to open that voting now. Vote 1 for yes and 2 for no.
Can't hear or understand you.
We're opening the period for voting now, and we're going to ask you to vote 1 in favor of the warrant article as presented, and 2 if you are opposed. The article passes, 255 to 152. Mrs. Sullivan?
Article 2, amend zoning bylaws, delete section 410.6, entitled Accessory Apartment Special Permit Regulations and Restrictions, in its entirety and replace it with a new section 410.6 entitled 410.6 Protected Use Accessory Dwelling Units, ADUs. I move Article 2 as printed in the warrant.
Second.
Select Board voted 5-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 8-0 to recommend.
Mr. Dennison will present on behalf of the Planning Board.
Good evening. Wayne Dennison, I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Board, and everybody really wants to talk more about zoning, and I'm going to talk a little more about zoning. Let's start with... all right, I know how I'm going to vote, so I'll use the clicker to go through this. All right. So, the Massachusetts legislature passed the Affordable Housing Act last August, and pursuant to that act, accessory dwelling units, meaning more than one dwelling unit on a piece of property, are now permitted as a matter of Massachusetts law. So nothing about what we're going to do tonight is about whether there should be accessory dwelling units on a particular piece of property. ADUs are smaller, independent housing residential units. They can take many forms: basements, apartments, in-law suites. They're designed for people to live in. They're fully livable and self-contained. And just to be clear, as of February this year, you can build an ADU in Duxbury. What this zoning bylaw is about is the notion that the state gave us the ability to regulate these to some extent. And what we are asking you to do through Article 2 is to authorize us to do some regulation, and I'll be candid with you, modest regulation of new dwellings that you are already permitted to put on your properties. So what the new law does, it says you can do this as of right, meaning you can do it if you go get a building permit. You go get a building permit, you can do it. You don't have to get special permission from the zoning board. I'm also the chair of the zoning board. You never have to talk to me about it. What you have to do is have a request that complies with the building law, complies with the other laws that we have in terms of building, but you can do it as of right. And we cannot prohibit that. So what the new law does is prohibits several things that we have in our bylaw are no longer legal in Massachusetts, and we have to fix them. And the effort here is municipalities cannot unreasonably restrict two things. You can't restrict the creation of these units, and you can't restrict their rental. So everybody in this room who owns land in this town has the ability under Massachusetts law to construct or to build a rental unit. What the state allowed us, the state also says you can't have owner occupancy requirements. There are parking mandates that go away. But ultimately, Duxbury, the other municipalities, we retain the authority to implement what are reasonable regulations. And reasonable regulations mean site plan review, Site plan review means that you go to the planning board and the planning board at least takes a look at this. Site plan review means that neighbors have the ability to come to the planning board and weigh in as to whether this is a reasonable build out. We can do site plan review, but we have to put it in our bylaw. And this is a bylaw that's intended to permit us to do that. We're trying to propose permissible townwide regulations as to how these ADUs work. Again, whether we do this or not, you can build an ADU in Duxbury. There are several provisions of the existing bylaw, the bylaw that we're trying to get rid of, that are no longer legal in Massachusetts. So whether you get rid of them or not, we can't enforce them. So rather than have unlawful zoning provisions, we drafted new ones. And I say we. What I mean by we is the planning board with the very direct help and assistance of town council. These are complicated regulations where we ask town council to show us models as to how we ought to do this. And then we, as the planning board, made some choices. And one of the principal choices that we made, consistent with another one of these special town meetings where people came out in droves to vote against anybody can have an Airbnb, we as a planning board thought that the town had spoken on the notion of short-term rentals. And so although you can in fact rent your ADU, what we are hoping to limit are short-term rentals. We are trying to limit somebody starting a new Airbnb in Duxbury on their property. And we think that that limitation is completely consistent with the prior special town meeting vote. And that's one of the principal things we do with this proposed bylaw. It also imposes the same setback height requirements that any other Duxbury construction requires. And importantly, and the state permits us to do this, it allows some level of site plan review. All right. These were drafted in close consultation on the advice of council. We think that these regulations permit us to regulate these new dwellings in Duxbury to the greatest extent that we're permitted. And I urge you to support the bylaw revision that's in the warrant as Article 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison. Any comments from the floor? Yes, up here.
Yeah, John Baldwin, 110 High Street. I'm proposing that we amend the site plan review and strike it completely for the reason that I think it's an unreasonable regulation under 760 CMR, which is the ADU regulations. So the regulations say any design standard that would not be applied to a single-family residential dwelling or a single-family residential zoning district. In the design standards, any requirement concerning dimensional standards such as dimensional setbacks and lot coverage, open space, so forth and so on, that wouldn't be applied to a single-family residential dwelling, is considered unreasonable. And also, the cost is unreasonable. So I think that all the site plan review regulations, A through J, are unreasonable. They don't meet the regulation. They're costly, and you don't have to do it if you would go for a regular building permit. To get a building permit, you have to take and go through a site plan review, basically with the building inspector, already by providing a plan. If you read these regulations, it talks about, and I don't want to go through every single one of them here, but basically it talks about having to do a lot of things, like, for instance, if you were within the setback, within 15 feet, you'd have to put up a fence, you have to, or shrubs, you have to take in, you have to make sure you direct your lighting away from your neighbors, you have to take in, anybody that's within 100 feet, you have to take and show a plot plan of all your neighbors all around you. Very costly and unnecessary because, like I said, we are going to take and meet all of our regulations through the building department, and there's a checklist that goes around to the Board of Health, the conservation agent, and the town planner, and the fire department. You're going to need to get permits for all of that. So I just think this doesn't make any sense. And also, it talks about having to, I think J, that you have to take and meet the regulation 615.7. And it doesn't even tell anybody in this room what isn't 615.7, which is very costly to do, and it does not apply to this ADU. So that's all I have to say. I think we need ADUs.
Mr. Baldwin, I don't think I heard an amendment, a motion.
Okay. I did take and fill out a piece of paper and I did mention that I wanted to amend it.
For a floor amendment, we would need a motion
Okay.
specifying what you're seeking to do.
Okay, well, I said amend. I'm looking for a motion to amend section 8A, including subsections A through J, to be stricken in its entirety, and also strike 10B in the ADU has undergone a site plan review process.
Second.
So discussion at this point would be on the subject of the amendment.
To start with respect to the amendment, and quite frankly, although I very much respect Mr. Baldwin as a respected builder in town and understand his desire to make this easier, what this amendment proposes is stealth ADUs. You do not, if you do what Mr. Baldwin just suggested, what this amendment suggested, you as a neighbor can wake up tomorrow morning and have a dwelling unit next to your house that you never knew was coming. That's what this amendment proposes. This amendment also suggests that somehow the revisions to the bylaw that we used town council to draft are somehow unlawful under the Code of Mass Regulations. And Mr. Baldwin made reference to design standards. Well, design standards happens to be a defined term under the Code of Regulations. And under the Code of Regulations, design standards refer to exterior design of or use of materials in an ADU. The vast bulk of these restrictions, and there are a small number of restrictions, A through J, have nothing to do with exterior activity. It all has to do with tell us what you want to build so that we can evaluate it. The suggestion is that you can't do anything that if you were to put up a single-family house, you wouldn't be required to do. Well, nuisances, including light pollution, are banned in all zoning districts. Every single person who wants to get a building permit to put up a new house has to submit a plot plan. All of these things are already in our bylaw. Let's not take it out with respect to the ADU. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is not discretionary zoning approval. What we're talking about is site plan review, where the planning board and the neighborhood can take a look at a proposal. You cannot say no to these, but what you can do is reasonably conditional. And in the event that somehow, some way, one of these things goes a little too far, that we decided that we restricted this thing just a little further than it ought to be restricted, our bylaw already says that we're going to sever unenforceable bylaws. And so if a provision is not lawful, we can't apply it. So I strongly recommend that you vote against stealth ADUs and at least give us the opportunity to let the neighbors know and to weigh in.
So the discussion on the floor at the moment is with respect to the proposed amendment to delete the site plan review. So I'll take comments on that.
I would encourage also what Mr. Dennison put forward, that everyone vote no. Duxbury has a sense of neighborliness, and to have an ADU come to your neighborhood with no review, the state is making this legal, and we have no choice in it, but we do have a choice tonight whether a neighbor can talk to a neighbor about, that light in my window at night is not appropriate, and to have a discussion. And as Mr. Dennison pointed out, Mr. Baldwin is a builder. Of course he wants the least regulations possible. That's his business. So I strongly encourage you to vote no.
Yes.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Jessica Williams, Tremont Street. I'm an architect, and I do spend quite a lot of time presenting before the zoning board. I am doing that primarily because we have numerous zoning restrictions that, when we are pre-existing non-conforming, require that we have to go before the zoning board. I make a lot of money standing before the zoning board. So if you wanted to go ahead and maintain these lists, I would continue to make a lot of money. That would be just fine with me. However, one of the things I do as an architect is I push the envelope. And what I'd like to know is, how do we restrict somebody from just building a barn on their property? They don't need to call it an ADU. They come later and decide to call it an ADU. And then later, the entire neighborhood gets to weigh in on whether you can finish the interior of a building that was just used as a barn for a while. And we have zoning codes that require that we have setbacks, coverage quantities. We're not allowed to cover too much of our property. These are all intended to protect the neighborhoods. We have 15-foot setbacks so that your light doesn't reach your neighbor, who has to be at least 30 feet away. So with these things in mind, I do agree with Mr. Baldwin that going to site plan review is just one more reason for me to make money for my clients, because I have to put together a whole nother application and go to a different board. Just happens to be the planning board versus the zoning board. I'd like to save my clients some money. ADUs are necessary. They are restricted by the state in terms of scale. They are restricted by the town in terms of scale. These are not a whole second house on your property. You cannot build a whole second house that is as big as the one that you have now. I think that the regulations that are in place are absolutely perfect and should not have additional site plan review. I do 100% agree with some of the other items that are in the bylaw. And I do thank everybody for putting their time in. As Selden said, I know that you work very hard, and it is a lot of work. I just disagree with that one point, and I do second the motion.
Thank you. I'll take one more, and then I think we can move forward with a vote on the amendment.
Hi, Colleen Breyer, Toby Garden Street. So I just have two questions. So if we take all of this out, will our existing laws, building, zoning laws, or whatever, I guess building review, will be changed, or it will be the same? I'm not sure.
See, the structure of the article, as I understand it, is to repeal the existing regulations with respect to creation of an accessory dwelling unit and to replace it with this new language.
Yes, but he wants to take this section out. So are we still covered by our other existing zoning regular laws, or only because it's an accessory apartment or unit, then it won't be covered?
This section addresses site plan review, and it would remove the site plan review requirement for an ADU.
Okay, so just for the ADU. Do we have a site review for regular home construction?
There are other site plan review requirements in the bylaw that are unaffected by this.
Okay. And then, so these aren't included in you say well, there's an existing Massachusetts law that was just passed. These site review that we want to put into ours are not included in that, and is that because you're trying to protect the residents from making sure things don't get out of hand? I'm still trying to understand it, sorry.
I'm happy to respond to that if you want.
Oh, yes, please.
So as we sit here today, you can build an ADU. But the state, unlike the way they did it with the MBTA Communities Act, said here we can pass reasonable regulations. And those reasonable regulations, the principal ones they permitted us to do are you can control short-term rentals, in fact, ban short-term rentals, and you can impose site plan review. And site plan review is planning board review that requires, in this instance, that the neighbors be notified, and that the neighbors have an opportunity to come in and at least comment on this thing. The other elements of site plan review are very common to any construction, including the need for a plot plan. There were complaints about you had to identify what zoning district you're in. Of course you have to identify what zoning district you're in. We want to know whether you can build this thing. The short answer here is what the amendment does. It takes out one of the two principal protections that the state permits us to do.
So the amendment before us that we would like to move forward with a vote is with respect to the change to the bylaw language that was printed in the warrant to strike A through J, and also the reference to, in the second line of 10B, the language and the ADU has undergone the site plan review process. I'd like to open the voting on the amendment. One would be to accept Mr. Baldwin's proposed amendment language to remove the site plan review, and a no vote would be to retain that language and we would move forward with the vote on the article as presented in the warrant. Just press 1 or 2, whichever you'd like. You don't have to cancel. As long as this light is on, just vote again.
Just hit the other number.
Just press the one that you want. The amendment has been voted down, 268 noes to 84 yeses. I know that before we move forward with the vote on the main article, we need the report of the planning board. I'm not sure if Mrs. Rapp or Wayne is going to...
Yeah, the report of the planning board is on May 12th, 2025. The planning board held a public hearing and voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend favorably in support of approval of Articles 2 and 3, 3's coming up, as written in the special town warrant.
I'd like to open the voting for the Article 2. A 1 yes vote is in favor of adopting Duxbury's new regulations for accessory dwelling units, and a 2 no vote would be against it. The article passes 296 to 44. Mrs. Sullivan, Article 3.
Article 3, amend zoning bylaws. Add a new section 401.2 parentheses 6 close parentheses entitled ADU exemption. I move Article 3 is printed in the warrant.
Second.
Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 8-0-0 to recommend.
Planning board voted 5-0 to recommend. This article is just a tweak that deals with the last thing we just did. We currently have a bylaw that provides that with respect to non-conforming structures that are already in existence but otherwise don't conform with zoning, you're limited to do some relatively small number of things unless you get a special permit from the zoning board. This ADU exemption eliminates the special permit requirement with respect to existing buildings that are non-compliant. There is still a provision of the bylaw you just passed that requires the zoning board to consider it, but you don't have to go through the entire special permit process in order to improve the existing non-conforming structure. And this is just, quite frankly, ministerial cleanup. We can't apply sections 4 and 5 of 401.2, irrespective of whether we pass this. But this does clean up the zoning bylaw.
I see no comments. We can move forward to open the voting. A 1 would be to amend to add new section 401.26 entitled EDU exemption, and a no would be to not add that language. Article passes 305 to 25. Mrs. Sullivan, Article 4.
Article 4, Citizens Petition, use of stabilization funds to increase the appropriation in the FY26 operating budget, line 30, entitled Police Salaries. I move Article 4 as printed in the warrant. A 2/3 vote is required. Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 4-3-0 to recommend.
Second.
We have a presentation from Derek Bennett on behalf of the citizens group proposing the article.
Good evening. My name is Derek Bennett. I'm a resident, a taxpayer, and the proponent of 2 articles to restore 2 police and 2 firefighter positions that were cut after the override failed. Let's be clear, let's be clear, public safety is not optional. It's not a luxury. These aren't extras, they are essential. Police and firefighters protect our homes, respond to our schools, and run toward danger when others can't. They are not special interest, they are the public interest. These articles don't raise taxes. They responsibly use stabilization funds, which remain well above policy limits, to ensure our first responders have the staffing they need to keep Duxbury safe. This isn't about politics, it's about priorities. Every resident, every student, and every neighborhood deserves protection, not next year, now. Let's send a clear message tonight that Duxbury backs its first responders. I respectfully ask for your support. Thank you.
Comments or discussion? Yes, over here.
Hi, my name is Patrick Dwyer. I'm the union president, Duxbury Firefighters, Local 2167. First of all, I would just like to thank the citizens, the residents of this town, for their continued support, especially Derek and the others that took time out of their lives to get this petition, the signatures, to get this vote to the floor. I think there was some concern about money from the bond stabilization, the money from the stabilization fund affecting the bond rating. I think Derek already touched on that, but money given to the fire department would not move the needle in that respect. And the bond rating is not coming to your house at 2 in the morning when you have a medical emergency. The bond rating is not putting out the fire. But the men and women of Duxbury Fire Department are, and right now we're short. So I'd ask you to vote yes. Thank you.
Okay. To my right.
Lester Lloyd, 21 Washington Street. I have 2 questions related to these 2 amendments. The first is, will this result in a stabilization fund level that meets the financial management policies and objectives for the town in the end? And second, I heard or read some discussion about whether these funds will include pension or other benefit payments? Is that also included in these monies that are proposed?
No, that is not true.
That is to say, they are included?
The proposed monies would be transferred for salary and overtime to their budget.
So how do we pay for the benefits?
They're already there. The pension is already, the monies are already included in those line items.
Oh, okay, so that money is already included. And the answer to my first question?
Yes, I did. I'm short, but yes, I did.
Yes, it meets our financial objectives.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Kent?
Sorry.
Good evening, Jackson S. Kent Jr., 1351 Tremont Street, also on the Finance Committee. This was a struggle for me. This is going to the cookie jar. We've got to get money out of the cookie jar. And if we take money out of the cookie jar, we've got to put it back. So this is a one-time shot for me. I'm supporting both articles. Very difficult because we shouldn't be spending this money for operational funding. And we have to pay this money back. And you're going to see one time, as far as I'm concerned, that we're going to dig into the stabilization fund for this amount of money. So your cost for my yes vote is understanding that in March, we're going to want more money. We need more money. It's not a want, it's a need. We'll work hard to get the money in the right pot, but we're going to need it. So I am supporting this because I know we need the staffing levels that we've had for 40 years without a change, basically, with 2 departments. And I request that you vote yes as well. Thank you.
Mickey McGonigal, 122 Island Creek Road. First, some background I think will help. Is I voted for the override in November. I voted for the override at the ballot box. And I supported increased funding for the police, fire, and other town departments. And a parenthetic comment is my son was a volunteer firefighter. He was also a Duxbury policeman for 5 years and president of the union. So I support the activity. I have already supported the activity. However, I challenge the method of using stabilization funds for operating budgets. As far as I can understand or remember, this has never been done before. And my objection relates to what will happen in the future. The town finance director has already indicated, at least through what I read in an article in the Clipper, that we're looking at a $600,000 shortfall for FY27. Presumably, this would add another $400,000 to that shortfall. And where would the money come from? Unless there is a successful override, the money would need to come from other town departments, including school department, DPW, and other town departments. The second point is that as the chiefs mentioned in their presentation in November, what do we do in the case of emergencies? In the case of emergencies, we rely on mutual assistance. That is, other towns in the area provide assistance to Duxbury as Duxbury provides to them when they experience an emergency. Typically, stabilization funds are used for emergencies, not for supplementing operating budgets. What I suggest is this, is that consider that the override failed by about 200 votes. I suggest we consider recommending an override for 2027 and focus our efforts on changing the minds of, all things being equal, 100 of the voters who voted against it to vote for it, and include what you're requesting here, as well as funds for other town departments. And thank you for listening. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Up here on the balcony.
Hello, my name is Mary Steinke, 237 Washington Street. I completely agree with the gentleman who just spoke. But I will say one thing about this particular robbing of the cookie jar, which is an appropriate metaphor. I didn't know this in 2005, but if you have a life-threatening emergency at home and you need a paramedic, there is a big difference between a paramedic and an EMT. A paramedic, you have to have two paramedics at the scene to provide emergency for a diabetic, heart attack, etc. Our son had a diabetic emergency 20 years ago, and we were in a phase where we were trying to phase in enough paramedics to fully support our fire services. And we didn't have that. And my son was having a low, and I had 5 firemen in his bedroom who could do nothing to help him because Duxbury didn't have paramedic services. So this was a budgetary decision that we made that we thought we could take care of gradually, but when it comes to these kinds of services, we don't have time to fool around. So as much as I don't like the idea of using stabilization money to get us through this year, I hope that every family will get the kind of services that we have gotten used to and that we need in Duxbury. Thank you.
Yes, over here.
But Dan Kostreva, 239 Elm Street, Duxbury. I've been involved in municipal finance either as a direct participant or observing it for over 40 years. Nobody ever wants to take money out of the stabilization fund. The cookie jar, folks, contains money you've already been taxed on and paid. So we're talking about withdrawing some money that you've already paid to help to stabilize a situation. We've heard a lot of talk both at the town meetings, we read it in the Clipper, and we're talking about it now, as Mary Stanke just said. We have emergencies, and the gentleman presenting all of this said, this isn't about politics, this is about priorities. And so if for fiscal 27 we have to make some more decisions about priorities, including considering another override vote, that's fine. But right now it seems that we need to stabilize our emergency services. So I suggest that you vote these articles.
Yes, Mrs. Sullivan.
I want to be clear. This was a very difficult conversation with your Finance Committee. We have, and I certainly for 30-odd years, have been adamant in stabilization, the uses of stabilization, always putting money aside, not taking out for an operating expense. And I surprised myself and others, I think, that I absolutely support using these funds so that we can have the assurances that these departments are adequately funded for the next fiscal year, with the absolute understanding that we are going to be asking the community for additional funds in an override. We are going to be looking for other departments to have the same support, but with also the understanding, as my friend Mary Stanke had just said, that you cannot say no. If someone is having a heart attack, you cannot say no. If somebody is frightened and needs the police to support them, you can't say no. It's not a matter of closing a department for an additional day or shortening hours. It is an absolute necessity. But we cannot, after I've made this impassioned speech to support this, we cannot do this again. We cannot use stabilization next year when we're standing here in March to support these budgets. We absolutely have to come to you with a plan to support these departments and other departments, education, DPW, facilities, and adequately provide the services that we all expect. But right now, for this year coming up, we need to answer the call. Thank you.
With the article before you, Article 4, citizens' petition to use stabilization funds to increase the appropriation, the FY26 operating budget. I think we're ready to move forward. A yes vote is in favor of using the stabilization funds to fund the article as presented. A no vote is against. Two-thirds vote is required to pass the article. The article passes 241 to 78. Mrs. Sullivan, Article 5.
Article 5, Citizens Petition, use of stabilization funds to increase the appropriation in the FY26 operating budget, line 32, entitled Fire Salaries. I move Article 5 is printed in the warrant. Once again, a two-thirds vote is required. Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 4-3-0 to recommend.
Second.
We'll have another brief presentation from Derek Bennett on behalf of the citizens proponent.
Actually, I do have a closing statement, if I could. And I just want to say that all of the departments, from education to infrastructure to community services, make up the heart of this town. But public safety is the backbone. And without that backbone, none of the others can truly stand. You can't have strong schools, thriving businesses, or safe roads without the foundation of police, fire, and EMS keeping us secure and protected every single day. Thank you.
Discussion from the floor. Open the voting. Article 5, citizens petition to use stabilization funds to increase the appropriation in the fiscal year 26 operating budget. As Mrs. Sullivan mentioned, two-thirds vote is required. The article passes 260 to 63. As one housekeeping item, as we have less people in the room and the articles are a little less complex going forward, I'm going to ask the gentleman to move the timing on the voting to 20 seconds instead of the 45. Mr. Sullivan?
Article 6, funding for the design, engineering, and permitting water quality improvement projects for the town's public drinking water supply. I move that the town appropriate the sum of $500,000 to fund the design, consulting, permitting, and construction services for the water quality improvements in the town's public drinking water supply and any and all costs incidental or related thereto, and to meet said appropriation, transfer the sum of $500,000 from water retained earnings, said funds to be expended under the direction of the town manager. The Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 6-0-0 to recommend. Fiscal Advisory Committee voted 7-0-0 to recommend.
Second.
We have a presentation on behalf of the PFAS Working Group. Can you introduce yourself and proceed?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Brian Weiner. I'm a senior manager and engineer with Ty and Bond Consulting Engineers. And I'm before you this evening regarding Article 6. We've been working with the town Department of Public Works and the Water Department for this water quality funding request. And this is part of an overall program that was initiated beginning with the prioritization plan in November of 2024. And I have a couple of slides that we'll go through, and if there's any questions about the work that we're proposing. All right. Yeah. So this is part of an incremental funding request as part of an overall program that was previously initiated. And so back in 2024 at the annual town meeting, there were design funds in the amount of $1 million that were approved. And so this is an incremental request to continue on with the engineering, design, and permitting to keep the project moving forward. Just a couple of notes up on the slides. So right now we're in the pilot testing phase of the project, so that's been started. And then after we get through the pilot testing, we'll start the design and bidding, and then ultimately it'll be the construction phase. So it's about a 5-year program to get from where we are now to have a completion of a treatment plant that's up and running. So where we are today is we've started the pilot work as well as owner's project manager services, and we're part of the owner's project management team. So again, piloting was started, so that'll tell us where we are with treatment before we get to the next step, which will be the design. And so as part of the overall project, we laid out a schedule that has all these incremental steps. So after we get through the piloting, we'll know where we are in terms of making recommendations and moving forward with the overall project. And so we're projecting that this will be the fiscal year 2026 incremental request to cover the engineering, and then after that there'll ultimately be a fiscal year 2027 request to continue with the engineering, and then there'll be a fiscal year 2028 down the road. So it's a multi-year program. Again, we're at the early stages, and this is to keep the project moving forward. I apologize at the beginning, I didn't truly explain what we're doing, but we're improving water quality for iron and manganese and for PFAS removal. And then this last slide has our schedule. A lot of numbers and different things on the schedule, but the overall theme is we have piloting, followed by design, followed by construction. It's about a 5-year program. Again, this request is for incremental funding for engineering to continue with the work. For the Department of Public Works and the Water Department, the deadline for compliance right now in Massachusetts is 2029. The federal compliance deadline is 2031, so we're on target with the federal deadline. We're a little bit behind schedule with the Massachusetts deadline, but we do foresee that it's a moving target and nothing's been finalized yet, but we're on track to be in compliance right now. If there's any questions?
Mrs. Breyer?
Hello. Hi, Colleen Brewer, Toby Garden Street. So just to clarify, you're asking for an additional $500,000 now because we are anticipating using up the $1 million that we've already done just to keep everything going forward quicker? Is that what you're saying, or is there some other reason that we're here now at special town meeting? Is there unforeseen things that happened? I just wanted to clarify.
No.
Thank you for the question, Colleen. The reason that this article the funding for this article is being brought forward tonight at a special town meeting is back at our annual town meeting, when we had previously appropriated $1.7 million over the course of 2 articles to allow the PFAS working group and our internal departments to work on PFAS remediation. That funding at that time, the $1.7 million, was insufficient for the group to achieve all of their objectives. They had requested over $2 million in order to get to the point that we're talking about here this evening. So given that we had only appropriated $1.7 million to allow the group to achieve certain objectives with design, engineering, and permitting, once the water retained earnings was certified and the balance was healthy enough to be able to utilize additional funding from retained earnings to allow these groups to further their objectives, we decided to put this article on the special town meeting warrant. This $500,000 coupled with the $1.7 million previously appropriated will allow the group to achieve the objectives on the schedule that we had talked about at the annual town meeting.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right, Article 6, funding for the design, engineering, and permitting water quality improvement projects for the town's public drinking water supply. This requires a majority vote. I will open the voting now. The article passes 235 to 26. Mr. Sullivan?
I move that the town appropriate the sum of $25,000 to fund the town's 4th of July parade ceremonies and related activities to be held in 2026, and to meet said appropriation, transfer the sum of $25,000 from free cash, said funds to be expended under the direction of the town manager. Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 3-4-0 not in favor.
Second?
Did you second?
So, second, apologize.
Mr. McNabb, are you presenting for the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. James McNabb, co-chair of the 4th of July Committee. I just wanted to thank everybody for your contributions this past go-around with the envelopes that we sent out to you. We are having a parade, and we have got enough money to pay for our public service, and we are going to move ahead. And this money tonight that you would be appropriating would be for next year's parade. And I do hope you approve this tonight. Thank you so much.
Article 7, 4th of July Parade. One comment I see. Yes, sir.
Dan Kostreva, 239 Elm Street, Tinkertown, Duxbury. I've lived in Tinkertown for about 50 years. My kids helped to build floats for the 4th of July parade. They loved it. They still talk about it, and they're in their mid-30s. And, you know, this is not just a tradition. This is about a priceless thing we have. It's joy and togetherness. Just think about all the friends and extended family that you've had to come and visit you and be part of the 4th of July parade. I rode in the truck one year pulling the float from Tinkertown, and I saw thousands of people together enjoying the parade. Many of you know me as a former teacher, and I said before, municipal finance officer. If this were raised and appropriated, it would be about 20 cents a month on your tax bill, okay? So you've got to decide whether you want to go home and tell your family that there won't be a 4th of July parade in 2026, or we can pass this minimal amount of money that's, once again, transferring money from the cookie jar that you've already paid the taxes on. Okay, this is free cash. You've already paid these taxes. So please, don't let this unbelievable tradition and family enjoyment disappear. Thank you.
Article 7 requires a majority vote. I'll open the voting now. The article passes 195 to 46. Mrs. Sullivan, Article 8.
Article 8, amend the FY26 operating budget, the ROCCC enterprise account. I move to indefinitely postpone Article 8. Recommended by 500 to recommend for the Select Board, Finance Committee 600 to recommend.
Second.
Any discussion? Article 8, we're voting on the indefinite postponement of the article. Requires a majority vote. Opening now. Article carries 155 to 10. Article 9.
Article 9, capital budget. I move that the town appropriate the sum of $67,950 for the purposes and in the amount specified in Article 9 of the warrant, and to meet said appropriation, transfer the sum of $7,950 from the Waterway Improvement Fund, transfer the sum of $60,000 from the PEG access receipts reserved for appropriations fund. Said funds to be expended under the direction of the town manager. Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 6-0-0 to recommend. Fiscal Advisory voted 7-0-0 to recommend.
Second.
Any discussion on Article 9, capital budget? This requires a majority vote. I will open the voting now. Article passes 146 to 18. Article 10.
Article 10, supplemental appropriations. I move that the town appropriate the sum of $271,933 to the general fund and water enterprise operating budgets previously adopted under Article 5A of the March 8, 2025 annual town meeting for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025, for the purposes and amounts specified in Article 10 of the warrant, and to meet said appropriation, the town raise and appropriate the sum of $4,491, transfer the sum of $187,500 from fund balance reserve for bond premium, and transfer the sum of $79,942 from the water retained earnings. Said funds to be expended under the direction of the town manager. Select Board voted 5-0-0 to recommend. Finance Committee voted 6-0-0 to recommend.
Second.
Yes.
Yes, Jeff Spenceley, 82 Strawberry Lane in Duxbury. On the table that was provided in the handout, one of the biggest increases in the cost is the interest on the debt. But then it also says that these projects were funded with with the debt service included in the cost. So my question is, why is the interest cost going up so much?
Mrs. McKinnon?
Thank you for your question. The purpose of this article this evening is to begin to permanently finance the debt service related to some of the projects that the town has previously approved. So as many of you are sure, I'm sure you're aware that the DPW facility is under construction, as well as the seawall is also under construction. Up until this point, we have issued temporary debt in order to start those projects, but now that we have achieved a certain level of completion, we are now ready to start to permanently finance some of the debt service for these multi-year projects, and that is why you're seeing an increase in the interest and principal on our debt service budget. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you for the explanation. Follow-up, I believe when these projects were presented, right, the debt service was considered, right? So was it, to use lack of a better term, is this bait and switch?
Hello, testing. This is us beginning to effectively pay the mortgage on those projects.
But that should have been considered when we approved those. Was it not properly disclosed when those projects were approved? That they were not appropriately funded and it was going to cost us more in interest?
To answer your question, so no, the projects were properly approved. They were duly approved by town meeting and by the voters at the ballot box, because we're talking about some debt excluded projects. The issue here is that up until this point, we have not paid any permanent debt service on those projects. We are just starting to finance those projects and begin the construction of those projects. So it's essentially that we're getting started.
Understood. My question wasn't that they were properly approved, but were these costs properly disclosed at the time they were approved? Perhaps decisions would have been made different if it was properly disclosed.
I'm not following what you're talking about by properly disclosed. The project for the seawall was presented to the town initially as a $20 million borrowing authorization. The DPW facility was initially proposed to the town for a $21 million project. We sought additional funding that was, again, approved by town meeting. So all of the costs associated with the project have certainly been disclosed to the community.
If that was the case, then the interest costs wouldn't go up. They would have been properly termed out debt. And
Thank you. Mr. Guitart?
I'm sorry.
Because of this, is it over and above the cost of the project?
This is not over and above the cost of the projects. No, this is the cost of the project. This is us getting started with these projects.
I understand what you're saying, but when there's an increase in cost on this sheet, that's obviously not properly disclosed when the project was presented.
I would respectfully disagree with the term not properly disclosed. Again, this is the town beginning to permanently finance the debt to start to pay for the cost of those projects.
Correct. So,
Thank you.
So
I'm going to cut that off there.
One last comment.
Mrs. Brer?
Colleen Brer, Toby Garden Street. So I think the question is, why are we voting on this now and not waiting until regular town meeting, or why we hadn't already voted on, why we're doing it now at special town meeting for this amount?
Okay, if that was his question, I apologize for not
I
following.
don't know, but that's what I'm
The reason that we're doing this now is because we are scheduled to issue general obligation bonds in September, which will be in FY26, and the first interest payment for those bonds will be due 6 months after debt issuance. So the payment will be due in FY26. Does that answer your question?
All right, Article 10, supplemental appropriations. This requires a majority vote. I'll open the voting now. The article passes 135 to 19. At this point, that completes the business of this special town meeting, and I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the special town meeting. Sina Dia? And I will take a voice vote on that. Opposed? Thank you very much.